Hey everyone, Correct Genes here, and we have a very special lock today. This is the Fichet F3D. Now, one quick note at the beginning. In the title of this video, I mentioned that I am picking the indoor cylinder, and that refers to this side of the lock. This needs to be lined up. That refers to this side of the lock. The main differences between this side of the lock and the other side of the lock are in the indoor cylinder versus the outdoor cylinder. On this side, there are only 5 active tumblers. The first one is passive, and I believe that is universal, whereas there are a full 6 on this side. But the main difference, besides the shutter, which doesn't really affect much, is that the outdoor side of the lock has a spring-loaded key check in the back. You cannot tension the lock unless it is depressed. And this creates problems if you have a front tensioning tool, because, of course, you don't necessarily need to rear tension. You can, every time you move something, go back and press the back of the lock in order to get the tension back engaged and work from there. However, it creates a lot of problems with picking, and all in all makes it extremely difficult to get anywhere when you have a front tensioning pick. So you need a rear tensioning one. Hopefully in the future I'll be able to get that for you, but today we are just going to be doing the indoor side. Now, I also want to give a quick shout out to Michael Huebler, hope I'm saying your name right, who wrote the TOOOL document on this lock and gave me some tips over email for how to gut it. Although my tooling is not the best, so you can see I definitely wasn't the most cosmetically, I didn't maintain the cosmetics of this lock 100% in the process, but it still works well. The key didn't work at the time of gutting it, so it was a necessity. Now lastly, we do have a little tool here. So the tip of this tool is designed to fit into the lock and manipulate the triangular cross sections of the tumblers. This front part of the tool applies pushing pressure to the lock. The lock operates by pushing. As you can see, when the key goes in, needs to push inwards, at which point the lock is authenticated and it can be turned and engages with the cam. So I apply pushing pressure with this. I also apply a little torque pressure in order to prevent wiggle back and forth as I pick, from just the fact that there's a little bit of play in the mechanism. And then, yeah, that's about it. You sort of go in there, apply a little torque, a lot of pushing, you pick at it. As you pick it, you need to sort of go back and forth in order to get through the gates, because there are little prongs on all of the tumblers that prevent you from just rotating until something is set. Additionally, about the operation of this lock, each of the tumblers needs to be both rotated and translated properly. So you can kind of see that this is waving back and forth. And that's a mechanism that I'll get into a little bit more when I gut it. So without further ado, let's get this lock clamped up and get it picked. All right, here we go. Key works. If not, rekeyed this to some trivial bitting. All right, got our tool here. Let's get it the right way around. Okay, we are engaged. So let's first go through and make sure everything is in a gate. Okay. I'm actually going to refer to Tumbler 2 as Tumbler 1 because Tumbler 1 is passive, and so I'm not going to be picking it. Okay, 1 feels fine, 2 feels fine, 3 feels fine, 4 feels fine, 5 feels okay. All right, let's try to find actual binding. All right, 4 is giving me resistance. I'm going to go ahead and do the translation test. Okay, he's bound nice and good into the first gear. Pull him back. All right, something else fell out of a gate. Let's find it. It's not 5, 4, or 3. Okay, he must have just slipped back in without really noticing. All right, let's start at the beginning again though. Okay, I'm getting resistance off of 3, so let's go ahead and have something else fall out of its gate again, naturally. Okay, 3 just was not all the way in there. All right, I think we're back. Getting some resistance on 1. Okay, shifted him over a little bit. He feels a bit better. 2 still feels good. All right, 3 got knocked into place right there. Where'd 4 go? There we go. All right, 4 feels fine. How about 5? 5 feels kind of spongy. I think 5, oh, it feels like 5 isn't actually binding at all in that, like, it's actually freely shifting its gates. So let's go back, figure out what is not in place. Okay, 4 is in place. 3 is in place. 2 was not in place. Okay, that's better. All right. Shifted 1 a little bit there. It feels even better than it did a second ago. All right, 1, 2, and 3 feel okay. All right. Feels like 4 is binding up against its gear. Just a little bit. I'm going to press it real hard. Okay, yeah, 5 is getting sluggish from my pressing. There we go. Okay. I think, yeah, lock is open. All right, clicked 5 into place, and that's it. You can see that the cam in the back here is rotating with the tensioner. And actually the nice thing about opening a lock like this is now that it's pressed in, you can just rotate it as much as you want. Look at that. Okay, let's get it back to Trude and pull it back with the pick. All right, now it's locked up. Okay, let's go ahead and get this gutted. So I do want to apologize beforehand for, well, what is effectively some damage I've done to this lock during the process of getting it gutted. For example, this pin needed to be obliterated because it was so in there that I could not actually pry it out. Now, my one excuse for doing this to the lock is that at one point, while I was playing with it early on, this cover came off, and what ended up happening was, you can see when the cover comes off, the front can sort of separate a little bit. And when the front separates like that, it actually allows you to turn the plug while everything's still inside. And in doing that, I accidentally rekeyed the lock, and my key stopped working. So I needed to basically do whatever it took to get in here and get in there and fix it. So that's my excuse. The lock was broken. I had to fix it. Now there's only 2 pins in here. I haven't put all of them in because otherwise it would take forever. Let's see where the other pin, oh, there it is. All right. Yeah, so the feedback in this lock is very weird, mostly in that the way that things bind is not consistent. It can happen in so many different ways. You can feel the gears scraping against each other. You can feel the tumbler scraping up against the gears. It really depends on, like, at the given time in the lock, what's creating the most friction. And it's the strangest thing that it's just not consistent. So you have to sort of test multiple things in order to get anywhere. Okay. Cool. Just gonna put my tray up here. Tweezers. All right, so hopefully this doesn't go too long, but I'm gonna be a little careful. I mean, the nice thing about it is in gutting this lock, you will rekey it. There's no real easy way to fully gut this lock without it screwing up the keying, but it's fine because the reassembly process involves keying it. So I have a key here. I could have any other key, and I could rekey this lock to any other key just by reassembling it using that key, because to reassemble this lock, you effectively build it around the key, which is pretty convenient. So if I wanted to, say, key this to a more difficult bitting or something, because, you know, this, I mean, I'll be honest, is a pretty easy bitting, I could do that. All right, so let's sort of demonstrate the key action here. What you can see is, hold this in. Oh, I'm holding it upside down. Key goes in. You can see this gets pushed forward. And sort of this thing in the back engages with the cam in the middle. It slips into this slot and causes it to turn. Now in the case of this side of the lock, the entire, right now you can see it's sort of locked in place. The entire thing inside of this housing moves when the key is in, so now you can see it's freely rotating. And I'll show you the notches that allow that to happen later. Now the reason that it works is because you can see this front part of the key has this bar that's attached across, and this needs to move inwards. And this is moving independently of this housing here. So what's being pushed is this bar in addition to the key as well as all the tumblers inside. So those are getting pushed forward, but what's not moving is these gear racks here. And the gear racks are what allow or prevent the key from moving forward inside of the lock. So let's go ahead and get this fully gutted. see, that's the top side. You gotta keep the orientation, keep track of that orientation. Okay, so let's go ahead and get all of these gear racks off. So these little things here, these are what the gears rotate on. And the position of the gears relative to these, and you can, this bar in here locks in the position of these. That's what keys the lock, effectively. So if you change that position, you change the keying of the lock. Now, there is a rack of 6 of these. I need to push that in. On both sides of the lock. This side and the other side, and we'll get it all out. The whole thing's going to get completely taken apart, don't worry. But on this side, they are shifted differently relative to this one. So these are a little bit more to the left in this orientation compared to the other ones, which are more to the right. And that's because the gears have these racks attached to them from different directions. So the front gears will rotate on these, and you can see, if the light will show it. There we go. You can see the gears poking through there, and you can see that there's no gear in chamber 1. But that's only one of the gears. And what this does is when the tumbler pushes the gear to the left or the right, this gear is going to rotate on the surface of this rack, which means that it's going to pivot around this side of the lock. The other gear will rotate around the other side, which means it pivots around the other side of the lock. And so the result is that if you don't have your shift correct, then the gears have rotated differently with respect to each other, and the gates no longer line up. And I'll show you what the gates look like shortly, so you can understand what that means. Let's zoom in a little bit. Okay, so that rack is completely off. Let's do the other side. All right, this is bottom. Where did my tweezers go? Okay, same deal here. There's 6 of these, and you can see how there's a little gap there, that little piece of metal. If we go around to the other side, whoop, come on key, don't fail me now, and hold it in, you can see that there is no equivalent piece of metal on this side, indicating that this is actually shifted forward more. In fact, you can kind of see it there. You see this one, these are all more that way than these. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and take the key out because it's not really necessary at this point. No, stop moving. All right, the lock has officially been rekeyed, and the key will no longer work until I reassemble it. I'll make a second video for reassembly, just so that this one doesn't go too long. Here's the front rack, or front little thing. Let's zoom back out so you can see these parts. Let's get the rest of these racks off. And you can see the other gear poking through there. So these are above each of the gears. Okay, and you can see now that there's no bar here. This thing, whoa, can now move on its own. And Tumbler 1 flew out, and Tumbler 2, there they are. So Tumbler 1 actually has this little spacer ring on it. And this is unique to this side of the lock. This other side of the lock does have all 6 active tumblers. Additionally, it has a spring-loaded key stop in the back. Its mechanism is a little bit different, which means that you sort of have to rear tension it in order to open it, and I don't have a tool that can do this. So hopefully in the future I will have a video where I pick this, but for now, this is the only side I can pick. Let's get back to this. You can see the first gear there. That's where this was sitting. First set of gears. Okay, so let's put this off to the side, like here, or let's put it up here. Okay, there's another set of little rivets I had to take off. sorry, this needs to be pulled back. There we go. All right, there's the full assembly. You can see on this other side that these slots are to the rear of this groove. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at these gates. So you can see these first gears got removed from the tumbler. So here's the tumbler. You can see that there are these little tiny, thin knot, or I guess cuts, and then there's these thick ones. Now the thick ones are what need to go into the true gates. So you can see on the gear, there is a bunch of shallow notches, and then there's the thick one. So if I put this in sort of randomly, you can see that this thick one won't go in. However, at the same time, all these little thin ones lock in the rotation. You can see that they're sort of, if I can actually get it to be in a gate, you can see that one sort of sticking through there, and it's locked in like a false gate, except it's just part of the gear. And then you put it on the true gate. I'm doing this through the camera, so it's a little awkward, like so. And you can see it pushes all the way through. And so that's how it authenticates. Now, the second gear acts as the check for shifting. So if you are shifted correctly, then the gears line up like so. And the tumbler goes through both of them. However, because the gears rotate in opposite directions when you shift it, if I were to shift to right, for example, this front gear would go half a notch to the right, 10 degrees. It's one of these gears. And the other one would go 10 degrees to the left, like so. And now you can go through the first gear, but the second gear blocks you, and it prevents you from opening the lock. And at the same time, the false little prongs will also lock into the second gear as well. Feeling for binding in these is roughly the same. If you're binding onto the first gear, what'll happen is this gear will be allowed to rotate because you're binding into the first gear, like so. However, it can still do that, which means that you can, if you turn to the right while you're binding into it, you'll shift it right along with the second gear, and vice versa. And then as soon as you bind past the first gear, like so, and you bind into the second gear will actually push up against the rear of its slot. And you can sort of feel that as well in a similar fashion, where when you sort of wiggle it, you get a bit of like sluggishness. Although now the actual rotation and your ability to shift is sort of blocked because of the fact that you can't really move left or right because you're now engaging both gears. So you need to pull back a little bit, and then you can rotate it. Now the nice thing is, in order to pick this, you don't actually have to, what am I trying to say? You don't need to put like lateral force on anything because of the fact that when you bind in the first gear and you rotate it, it automatically sort of translates it across its rack. So the entire picking process is purely rotational. You just need to make sure that you have a tool that's able to, wiggle back and forth and make its way through the lock. Now just for completeness, I'll show that all these gears do in fact have their gates, and all these tumblers do in fact have their prongs. I guess that's how you want to say it. So yeah, I hope in the future that I will be able to make up a tool that's able to pick the other side. The real difficulty when it comes to picking the other side is that, what am I trying to say? The action of rear tensioning creates significant difficulties when it comes to creating a tool for this, because you do need to be able to translate to the left and the right. And the problem becomes being able to make a tool that has a rod down the middle that can push the back of the lock, and at the same time be able to have a pick head over that rod that can move to the left or the right, which is not a trivial problem and requires tools that I don't have. As you saw with the giant mess that I made with the lock while gutting it, I wasn't exactly able to, what am I saying? Do it cleanly because I don't have the best tools. But thankfully my tools were good enough to be able to make something to pick this. In fact, my pick head is made from an epoxy called JB Weld. It's a 2-part epoxy and I just sort of globbed it on here and made a shape out of it. And actually now I'm going to go ahead and clean these tumblers because this thing likes to erode off into the lock. But because I have it gutted, I can clean it. So that's not a problem. Anyway, of course, if you have questions about the operation of this lock, I'd be more than happy to answer them. It is a very interesting lock, and I think, as far as I know, this is the first time anyone's taken one apart on video, so I'd be happy to answer any inquiries you might have. If you want, I can also make another video on how to reassemble this lock around the key. It's a little bit of a finicky process, but it's pretty cool. You basically just line up all of the gears and tumblers onto the key in the true gates, and then you build the lock around the key. And in that way, it comes back together. Actually, for good measure, I'll just show you what the tumblers look like on the key. Where'd that passive one go? Here we go. You can see we got our shifts and our rotations. This one actually doesn't have anything shifted off to the right. It's all left and middle, so it doesn't show up that aggressively. I one day do hope to get a key with a more difficult bitting so that I can pick that one, just to show the method does work. But all in all, yeah, so this was a method by which you can pick an F3D under tension using only feedback from the lock itself, not decoding, not sort of matching the key. This is pick. This is a picked lock. So yeah, that's it for that, and have a good one.